brought by prisoners who have been tortured with sleep deprivation for years now, every 30 minutes, being jarred with loud noises and metal banging on metal, every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day. So there's two people who brought lawsuits, and we're here to support their lawsuits against the California Department of Corrections. Stop the torture. We all know sleep deprivation is torture. It's internationally recognized as torture. It's no secret to the Department of Corrections that sleep deprivation is torture. So we're here to see the end of it. We have some people who are going to speak. My name is Verbena. I'm with the Prisoner Hunger Strike Solidarity Coalition. I came from Eureka, California to be here today in solidarity with all people who are suffering from the Department of Corrections' so-called security welfare checks. Every 30 minutes being jolted with these so-called checks and being deprived of sleep, which causes all kinds of physical and mental problems and increases the risk of chronic and even deadly health problems. I'd like to first introduce Carol Strickman.
My name is Carol Strickman, and I'm a staff attorney at Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, just a few blocks from here. And I'm one of the attorneys on the Ashker case, which was challenging prolonged solitary confinement in California prisons. In the connection with that case, we went up and made a lot of interviews up at Pelican Bay SHU, the security housing units. And just as our case was settling back in 2015, a big change happened up there, and that was the beginning of these security welfare checks every half hour, which is 48 times a day for each prisoner in the SHU and ADSEG. And those of us on our team felt this was depriving our clients of their rights, and we went out and did a major investigation. I was a part of that, and we raised the problem with our magistrate and pressured others to review it and see what was going on and make changes. So we did succeed indirectly in getting some of the checks reduced in frequency to 1 hour at Pelican Bay SHU only, at the nighttime shift only, from 10 to 6 a.m. But other than that, they're going on there, and all the ADSEGs, all the SHUs and PSUs in California prisons. So we were unable to do any more than that, and that really left it to the individual prisoners who were suffering to continue their protest, and several did, and they filed 602s, which are challenges, in grievances within the system. They have to file to 3 levels, and then they have to file in a federal court or a court. And this is not easy to do when you're incarcerated, and they make a lot of barriers to filing these 602s, and it's hard to file a lawsuit for any of us, let alone an incarcerated prisoner. So they really get a lot of credit. What's happened is the court has appointed them attorneys, and so there's 2 cases today that have the same lawyer on it. And they're opposed by the same office, the same that opposed us, which is the State Attorney General's office, whose offices are behind us. Now, the attorneys, let's see, the lawyers today, the case is on today for a motion to dismiss the prisoner's case that the Attorney General's office has brought. And they're basically saying you can't come to this judge and ask the judge to do something, because these checks were made, are being done in compliance with an order from a different judge in a different court in Sacramento, federal court in Sacramento. So really, you need to go, it's really a Coleman case issue, and not, you can't file your own case here. And that's what they said in our case too, as we tried to protest it through the Ashker case. So I'm just going to give you a little background on what's going on today and what the Coleman case is all about. The Coleman case is a big lawsuit of challenging mental health care in the state of California, filed in 1990. So this is the 28th year of that case. The argument was, and it's was agreed and true that the mental health care is below constitutional standards in California prisons. There's many components, and the lawyers have been fighting it for years to bring it up to standard. There's a special monitor appointed by the court to oversee mental health in California prisons. And one thread of that case has to do with suicides and suicide prevention, because suicides happen more frequently in solitary units than in general population. So the thought is, well, if someone's suicidal, we need to do frequent checks. And that's why these checks have started. The trouble is that these checks, that there was no adversarial system here. The lawyers, the prisoner lawyers thought that these would be good things to do, and the prison agreed to do them. And so this was just a stipulated order that the judge signs. And if anyone knows when both sides agree, the court generally is going to grant the order. So there was no hearing about the importance of it, the need for it, how it's going to be done, or any of that. And it's a very general order. No one objected or challenged it. The judge issued the orders and left it up to CDCR how to do it. And that's the problem. The implementation's been horrible. There's no concern for the prisoners and their ability to sleep or function during the day. So whatever benefit is just being sabotaged by the officers that are implementing the checks. So what we're going to see today is the Department of Corrections is arguing the case should be heard by the other judge. But you know what? They have said the opposite in someone else's case. In someone else's case, they tried to get it connected to that other judge, and they said, your case about these checks have nothing to do with the Coleman case, so you can't. But now they're saying it has everything to do. So that alone just shows that they're really unethical in their arguments. They say, well, this has already been litigated, fully and fairly, but it wasn't. It was a stipulation, as I mentioned. And they say that, besides, these guys should get immunity because it's a court order. But the law doesn't give you immunity just because there's a court order. If the right that is being infringed upon is clearly established, and the right to sleep is clearly established, then you're not authorized to violate that right just because there's a court order. So that's what the case is about, and that's what we're going to hear today. Thank you.
By definition, prisoners are captive. They face retaliation. So speaking to the women in Chowchilla's segregation unit, I can speak to some of the forms of the retaliation for filing an objection to sleep deprivation. And it includes anything from frequent and destructive cell searches to physical punishment. Actually, when prisoners are transferred, they're shackled with their hands behind their back, and then the guard will push them, causing them to fall down. They can't brace themselves, fall down, face first on the concrete, which is everywhere in prison, and then they drop kick them. They cause actual physical damage to prisoners who dare object to being woken up every half hour. Not to mention that if you say you're waking me up, they will yell at you. I have talked to guards who have expressed to me their belief that their job is to punish people. It's not to rehabilitate them, it's not to assure safety. All of the things that CDC pretends about rehabilitation is complete pretense. There is no rehabilitation except what the prisoners do for themselves. So I want to say that I support prisoners who stand up. It's really important, and it is at enormous cost to themselves that they do that.
Ms. Willow Katz, I'm with California Families Against Solitary Confinement. This sleep deprivation is torture. We have to stop the sleep deprivation, the security welfare checks in California solitary units. This sleep deprivation violates the U.S. constitutional 8th Amendment right to protection against cruel and unusual punishment. And it violates the California Penal Code 2652, which is also supposed to protect people from cruel and unusual punishment. Sleep deprivation and sleep disruption are known. There's a vast medical literature documenting that sleep disruption and sleep deprivation causes huge problems in mental and physical health. One of the things that most blew me away is it causes genetic defects in over 700 genes in less than 1 week of sleep deprivation, and these people have been sleep deprived for over 3 years, going on 4 years. It causes numerous chronic illnesses, including diabetes, heart disease, cancer, a lot of potentially fatal illnesses, obesity, strokes, heart attacks. So we have got to stop this sleep deprivation torture. We have got to let people inside solitary units in California, we got to let them sleep. So we're here to support the lawsuits by Mayor Suarez and Christopher Lipsey, saying that this sleep deprivation, the security welfare checks, are denying them their constitutional rights, and that they want the security, and we want the security welfare checks stopped now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lily. I'm with Critical Resistance, and we are a member, I would say a proud member of the Prisoner Hunger Strike Solidarity Network. We have been supporting for a little less actively lately, but supported with the hunger strikes years ago. And just want to give a little bit of context as to what the connection is to why we're here this morning and why we will continue to resist. So, as you heard, this is follow-up to strikes that have been happening since 2011 all across California. Those are strikes that were prisoner-led. They were strikes that were prisoner-supported by family members on the outside, by friends, by loved ones, by all people in solidarity with the needs of prisoners who saw that prisoners, in particular prisoners in solitary confinement, are the most targeted people in our society right now. They are among the most oppressed. And we know that when prisoners rise up, when prisoners in solitary confinement rise up, when prisoners who are under sleep deprivation rise up and join each other in solidarity, when they cross racial boundaries, when they signed the agreement to end hostilities and came together, people stood behind them. Thousands of people across California stood up behind these prisoners and supported the strike of 30,000 prisoners or more. And that also included people across the country, prisoners and loved ones, as well as people internationally. Prisoners in Palestine wrote messages of support to the prisoners on hunger strike in California. So we know that when people can resist in the most drastic situations, who are most targeted, who are most oppressed, then both those of us on the outside have to stand with them, and we also know that that resistance cannot be defeated. So here we are at the court building, and we don't know what the judges are going to tell us today. They could dismiss this case, but we know that they will not dismiss the resistance of prisoners. They will not dismiss us. We will continue to stand up here and every day until we end this torture and sleep deprivation, until we say that solitary confinement, indefinite, perpetual, any day, solitary confinement will be ended. And this is not just about solitary confinement. This is about all imprisonment. And we will make sure that the prison system is abolished, because our call today is not just to end solitary confinement. It's not just to end sleep deprivation. Our call is to free all prisoners. So when I say, what's the call? You say, what's the call? Free them all. What's the call? Free them all. What's the call? Free them all.
All my relations, we give thanks for your presence here and for the issues at hand. We have to understand that in the social order within which we live, at the bottom of the social rung is that 1%, and that 1% today is in dire straits. It's living in a dire situation, dangerous situation within the Department of Corrections here in California, but also across America, where that 1% at the bottom rung does not really have any constitutional protections anymore, as we assume. We assume a lot of things about the imprisoned class continuously growing because of mass incarceration. The final solution to social disorder dissidents is imprisonment. If you don't fit in out here, you're going to prison. Plain and simple. We have a situation here, a president, hopefully a president that will bring some relief to that imprisoned class here in California, which leads the country, if not the world, in state-of-the-art imprisonment facilities and techniques, policies by mad prison bureaucrats that think that they can control the imprisoned class with all sorts of experiments. The indefinite solitary confinement regime that went on at Pelican Bay Prison for 20 years was finally stopped 20 years too late because it did a lot of damage during all that time. The prisoners themselves helped in that horrid regime. They had been in there 20, 30 years, maximum security, because they didn't conform, they didn't fit in. They stood up for themselves, they resisted, they weren't allowed to be broken down, and that's who ended up in these security housing units across the country. The imprisoned class does have a leadership, and it's those prisoners who can brave the tyranny, daily tyranny they face, and face up to your captors, because you don't have a listening audience, you don't play to any particular choir in prison. You are there alone, naked. You got these huge Darth Vader SWAT team guards standing over you, beating you down, intimidating you, threatening you, tyrannizing you. Now, we've seen recently where the most successful hunger strikes in American prison penal history took place here in California. Prisoners put their life on the line, the same prisoners who had been in Pelican Bay for 20, 30 years, a lot of whom we have worked with over the years. They went 60 days. 60 days without food. If I went 60 days without food, I would die. You would die. They were ready to die. It took 60 days for the Department of Corrections to say, well, let's negotiate. And then they started this whole thing about lying, doublespeak, the rigmarole of what they say they're going to do and what they do. They don't do anything. It keeps being the same thing, right? We don't know all this, but the prisoners, I trust the imprisoned class, their leadership, their brain trust to know, in fact, if they're going to get a good deal or not, a square deal or not, a fair deal or not, if they're going to get anything for putting their life on the line. So, the Department of Corrections all of a sudden comes around and says, the top guy, the rector, the head guy, the governor's main prison guy, he came around one day and said, our experiment with solitary confinement didn't work. We have to admit that. It was an experiment. And what we've been saying all along, you experiment with people's lives in there, because that's what you do. You're continually trying to control this growing mass of people that don't want to be controlled. You don't give them a voice at all. You slam them down, because what you're after is that $50,000 a year annual rent to rent on one of those security housing unit cells. One cell for one prisoner. You got to find people to put in there. These security housing units ain't going away. They were built to stay. They were built to hold people. And if you got empty cells, you're not at full operational whatever. You're not making money. You got to keep the cells filled. So who do you fill them with? There's got to be a reason why. I kind of find this funny, but also sorry, because who you fill these thousands and thousands of cells with are dumb kids that come from the barrios, from the ghettos like myself. That's who fills these cells when we're young. Okay? That's who's filling these cells. They didn't do anything else except get swept off the street because of their ignorance, their violence, whatever they went to prison for. And once they got in there, they became an asset. They're worth money. Prisoners are worth money. So finally, I'm going to shut up, because finally, where we have a situation here that's developed and that we have been monitoring for years. Check us out on online, prisons.org. We were one of the first human rights prison activist groups. And we started our activity around Pelican Bay. And it was really bad. We stood in front of this federal courthouse building, 1994-95, under a big prison case called Madrid versus Gomez. And we were protesting then for change. So what we have now, we have finally two very important civil complaints against the Department of Corrections and their practice of sleep deprivation as a program, a policy, an experiment that they don't know what they're doing, how it's hurting prisoners, because it's too soon to say. These cases are important because it'll set a precedent where all prison regimes, anywhere and everywhere, county jails will think, you know, the president's doing it, so we can do it too. California's doing it, so we can do it too. We're gonna wake you up every half hour under the pretext that we're saving your life, we're saving you from you committing suicide, when in fact, these wake-up calls are driving prisoners mad. We're fortunate to have had these two cases finally come around into the court system, but we can't have faith in the court system. The court systems, the federal court systems, they're complicit in letting the Department of Corrections get away with whatever they want to get away. So that's, you see who we are. We're not a lot of people, but we've been at this for a number of years because we think it's one of the most important social crises that America faces. What do you do with your surplus populations other than lock them up and make money? The big, powerful state unions today are all guard unions, right? And I'm just telling you, I'm being told to wind it up, so I'm winding it up. Thank you. But thank you for being here, and we got other people that want to say something too. Ohio, all my relations.
We're gonna go ahead and wrap this up, and I'd want to just encourage people to go up to the courtroom. It's on the 17th floor. It's courtroom 2, and it's gonna take a little bit to get up there. We have to go through metal detectors and security checks and all of that. But I just want to close out by saying that, you know, this case, the issue of sleep deprivation has been going on for a while, has been going on particularly since 2015 when the legal settlement was reached. And it was a way for the prison regime to repress, to attack the gains that were made by the prisoners that had been on hunger strike, that did all the organizing and waged resistance against their confinement. And I'm sure that this has been, mentioned, many people know this, but as of, I believe 2 weeks ago, all of the representatives that were at the forefront of the fight against solitary confinement were the ones that were released from solitary confinement after decades, have been put back into solitary, right? So think about that for a moment as we continue this struggle, as we continue our support on the outside, and the importance of continuing to fight and support the prisoners that are organizing with family, with loved ones. And us being here just shows that we are not going to let up. We're going to fight. It's important for us to continue showing up. So I thank everyone for coming out here. Join us up in the courtroom, and we want to show all the support that we can, so that we'll get our victories steadily, slowly, and it's a protracted struggle. Thank you.